Hey, time for another DraftScience video presentation and such. So, I guess I'm going to read a Stephen Bro comment, mostly talk about transformers, radio transmission, subtle distinction between the two, and that kind of stuff, but it has to be stated in some sort of talk about the nuisance value of this crap. So let's understand, I did have a perfectly good arrangement with baldy cats or conspiracy cats to actually have a conversation about physics and be able to point some questions at baldy cats and see what kind of answers a physicist would have. You know, a school teacher. Don't really need that. Thank you for telling me. Whoa, I'm so excited. Love the spam, right? Oh, now I have to go all the way back. Lost the right page. I do have an obscene number of tabs open. I am just amazed that Firefox can function now, with 50 tabs open. Or 60. Yeah, whatever the hell it is. Oh, an obscene number. Alright, that's not the right video. What the hell did it do with my video? Oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry. I didn't, it's YouTube, it's the world, the commercials, whatnot. So we had this arrangement, and then the trolls had to interject, pretend I'm some horrible person. He farted in the direction of a 5-year-old and made him cry. He's evil, evil, evil. So it's this whole cancel culture. You're not even allowed, you're not allowed to express an opinion that's outside of the, accepted opinions. And if you do, you have to be canceled. And these are people who probably rag on this whole, they have no identity. They defend nothing, they just tear down. And so, because of these trolls interfering, that got ruined. For no good reason. It gave baldy cats the perfect excuse to run away. And, that's all. So all we got for it is less information. You got to see less happen in the universe because of their interjection. And again, so now Stephen Bro is interfering in, my conversation with Franklin Who and injecting himself into it with all of his derogatory bullshit. And it's like, what the fuck is this? This is what you're going to do for the rest of your life, is harass me. And that's all it is, right? Now, if I chase down Piro and every conversation he had with some psychotic, because he loves to talk to psychotic people, and I injected into every one of those conversations, oh, Piro thinks the spring produces different amounts of force. The same compression produces the different amounts of force. Oh, what a fucking idiot. Oh, what a fucking... What would you call me except an idiot, an asshole, a jerk? I mean, what the hell is this crap? I mean, it's just so petty and silly. Well, anyway, and he types all of this crap, and it's just such crap. He doesn't even know who he's talking to, so he hasn't watched years of Franklin Who interacting on the internet. I have. Okay, and and so he's saying things that obviously I already know what Franklin's going to say, because I know Franklin pretty well, relative to this asshole. So anyway, it's just, but you're just like, what the fuck is this horse shit? I mean, this is what comes with the internet, but I mean, it is just so... Like, this is already a hard enough business to be in, and these assholes just have to make it more difficult. You have to keep more things secret. And like I said, you get less. That's the bottom line. Less is published on the internet because trolls do this shit. Ugh. Stupid. Anyway. Well, despite my disagreements with Gary on a number of issues, I liked his comment, and yours too. So there's, not much sense to that. But anyway, frankly, for different reasons. And the video too, of course, because I do agree with Gary that a particle model is feasible. Although I don't agree with the description Gary has settled on. And there was nothing wrong with the description, and I'll point out how it's a really good description. But anyway, nor his logic as to why he believes it works a certain way. I am more flexible than Gary, although on the possibility I may be mistaken on particles versus waves. So it's all this hemming and hawing. He can't settle on anything. It's just, oh, this is such valuable content. He's providing so much information here, basically saying wishy-washy, wishy-washy. I don't know. you know. Anyway, if I had to put money on it, for me, the odds are 99% in favor of particles. Well, this doesn't even solve the distinction, because clearly Franklin believes, in a sense, in a particle field of ether. So we still haven't gotten too far. The real point is whether the energy is flying through an empty space, or whether the energy is communicating its energy to a bunch of other dominoes. Which I say kind of is, there are reasons not to believe, because we don't see the energy divided in half. Like the ether particles, there could be a circumstance where they're next to each other and the particle goes right through the middle and creates two new particles. They'd have to have equal energy because they can only move at one speed. And so now you're stuck with, the creation of energy again. I won't feel devastated, though, if it turns out I was wrong. Exciting. It's just a curiosity value to me, really. Yeah, well, whatever. All of us we can say that to some extent, but these arguments are semi-important in that we're really attempting to find a truth. And the truth, if it means something to people, in understanding that, well, if you really don't know the truth, you don't usually get right answers, that it's kind of an important discussion. It's really not just a curiosity. I've not yet watched the entire response of Gary to this. Well, it wasn't even that long, and that's pretty pathetic, too, that you're rambling out of your ass and you didn't even watch the video. And in all honesty, I can't take too much interest in it because I keep thinking, why aren't either yourself or Gary simply asking people who have decades of experience with radio? So this is the part where he obviously doesn't know Franklin, hasn't watched any of the science chats, that took place every Saturday. So he knows nothing about how harassed Franklin has been by these professional experience types, because they're arrogant and obnoxious in their statements about what reality is. So, an expert, Harry Rinker, is obnoxious in defending, well, we have the math and that's the end of the story. So there are two fields, an electric field and a magnetic field and all this horse shit. And Franklin's simply saying, I don't see any evidence of these two fields. I see an outcome that looks pretty standard, like a sound wave. I don't see something to indicate there has to be the injection of two different kinds of fields and two different kinds of expansion and contraction. So that doesn't work for me. Now, I would say, in some sense, Franklin doesn't go far enough to say some reasoning why some of that could be understood. And I'll go into some of that reasoning. But anyway. So this is just horseshit, because anybody who has any experience in this process of being a dissident knows the experts are so full of shit, and the only purpose they would serve, like having a baldy cats or somebody to interrogate, is to show just how full of shit they are, just how you can trap them in saying nonsense things that aren't consistently true. So even though they say it's true, you'll show them examples where it's not true, and they'll have to say, oh, well, we still believe it because we believe it, and it's written in our Bible, and blah, 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 blah. So, the whole point is to show the experts aren't experts. That's the whole point of the exercise, is the argument that fundamentally they've just made a bunch of stuff up, called it the bandwagon, and they're running it through town, and it's a pile of shit. It's a rickety piece of crap. And we're all supposed to bow to it, and we're all supposed to throw our tax money on it. And, we're all supposed to be servants to their brilliance, and it's not brilliance. It's all bullshit. But anyway. 2 decades of experience in radio. Not me. I'm a noob. Only learned enough to conduct various microwaves experiments. Yeah, you didn't conduct them in the way they needed to be conducted in connection with Gary's claim. So it really wasn't that connected, because Gary kept saying, we'll do, Gary kept pointing out how this is difficult and we need to be careful, and you kept just saying, let's just go, 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 go. Why aren't you consulting real experts to give you some feedback? Yeah, the feedback would be, shut up, Franklin. It's a fucking magnetic field, Franklin. That would be the extent of the feedback. Okay, shut up, Franklin. Or advice how to proceed with tests like these. Yes, well, they're really not going to advise because they have already a belief and they would never even consider doing tests that might show their beliefs to be horse shit. So obviously that won't happen. Oh, God, you're such a stupid fuck. You really just don't know anything about this whole process of arguing against authority, do you? You really don't know what that is, right? You just don't have any experience in arguing against authority. You're just submissive to it, huh? All right, so you don't have to waste too much time merely guessing stuff that experts can tell you in 1 minute. So again, this is all fundamental physics. Obviously, it's not the part that the experts have seen either. And it has to be understood in a huge context, not a small context, a huge context of all experimentation that's ever taken place in the history of mankind. Lots of these subjects have nuance that you have to see in a complete context. You can't see in a narrow context. And building stuff that experts can perhaps loan to you. So, when I made that argument to you that maybe we should ask somebody who already has all this equipment to do the experiment, you didn't seem very interested in hearing that as a suggestion from me, idiot. Anyway, if you enjoy building your own stuff, that's fair enough. Apparently you do. But anyway, I can relate to that. I am full admiration of anyone who tries to do everything themselves, but it's not the fastest way. Blah, 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 blah. If you want results ASAP, yeah, well, I don't think either one of us are asking for those. We're just musing in this phase over the possibility of creating an experiment that will, in fact, provide the necessary information one way or the other. A well-equipped expert can probably shortcut past these early stages of transmitting over short distances and then trying to interpret what's going on. So I would argue this has nothing to do with short or long distances. The energy, if it did, then we'd already be conceding the energy was in some other kind of form besides what either me or Franklin are proposing, because there would be no way to see any difference in the energy in the short field versus the long field. Anyway, they can probably explain what's going on. Just again, I guess it's probably a bit embarrassing talking to experts who might laugh at us. So he's put Franklin in the same category as this idiot who really hasn't any experience, where Franklin has lots of experience talking to arrogant fucks. And so he's really disciplined. He doesn't react. He's learned to take their shit, but he knows that's what I'm getting. I'm just going to get shit back, okay? I'm going to propose something. They're just going to shit back. Okay, trying to second guess mainstream theory. So again, this is the effort isn't to second guess. The effort is to point out obvious flaws, okay, dualities, wave particle duality, some kind of silly idea, magnetic, electrical, wavy thingy, some kind of crap they say that can't make any sense to anybody rational. There's no way you can sit there and say, oh yeah, I fully understand it traveling through space like this. Oh yes, that makes perfect sense. You see that all the time. Anyway, if indeed that is what yourself are doing. So again, he's almost mocking any dissidency. Is it just, oh yeah, we're just sitting here trying to force UFO theory to be right? Oh, fuck that. Anyway, a few months ago, for instance, yourself and Gary, oh Jesus, were backing one another up in your wild guesses. So again, they're not wild guesses. They're guesses within the constraints of experimental evidence and trying to make it all make sense, you fucking cunt. Oh, what a little weasel. Anyway, about ideal antenna length, agreeing it would be the same as the wavelength. Then a few weeks later, Gary realizing it should be half the wavelength. I don't know if Gary realized that, frankly, so I guess you didn't even pay much attention to that argument. That bisecting the antenna, you can use half the exposure length if you use a dye antenna, a two-pronged antenna. But that wouldn't necessarily be telling you the actual polarization, right? So it's not about the wavelength, it's about the polarization. So you're not even getting that part. The antenna has to capture the spread of the energy. And ideally, if it's going to collect the most energy, it has to collect the whole polarization. If it's only collecting part of the polarization, then it's only going to be able to see part of the photons, only half of the photons, for example. It still gets a signal, but the ideal length is a length large enough to collect all of the as many photons as possible without them being broken by your antenna not being long enough. Anyway, I guess that eventually have to be corrected. Well, let's see, where was I? Realizing half the wavelength. There is no need to guess, is my only point. I think there's lots. The theory still is the theory, and the fact is you can shape antennas in lots of bizarre ways, and they work. Okay, by all kinds of different kinds of arrangements do actually work, and there's theory as to why they work. Oh God, what a jerk! I think it's good to try and guess. Anyway, it's more interesting to guess. Yeah. So again, just this word guess. So no, it's a puzzle that needs to be solved. It's like a Rubik's Cube. You're not really guessing. Okay, you're changing your theory, you're modifying the theory to try to fit the evidence, and you're trying to understand enough of the evidence to understand how I can make those things match. But again, he's diminishing it all. He's hardly a dissident, right? Anybody who says go ask the experts is hardly a dissident. Okay, it makes it fun. But I guess the impression that neither you nor Gary are just in it for the fun. Yeah, that's right. I want results that are quite certain and can't afford to waste months or even years having your conclusions or guesses that eventually have to be corrected. Well, I don't even know. I mean, obviously we're grown people and we sort of understand the process, and it's never been easy, and yeah, it's not easy to change the norms. Okay. It doesn't happen easy, and especially in the modern era, ironically, it seems even harder for any change to be made from tradition, because they cancel culture you. Okay, with that in mind, I hope it might be helpful to know the following. So he just keeps going on. You keep guessing a transformer-like action cannot possibly happen over a foot or two initially. So again, this doesn't have anything to do with transformer-like action in the sense that the argument is about induction, okay? And that's really just the process. The process is the antenna is an inductor, and you're going to collect the energy with the inductor. And the transformer is doing a similar thing, but we've obviously changed transformers to make them more efficient, just like we changed solenoids to make them more efficient by shoving cores in them. Anyway, if I remember your first experiment correctly, you later, over a few yards or meters, when you respond to Gary's objection, which I share on this, I think, the wavelength, so again, keeps talking about wavelength, if it's the only factor, of that first experiment was too long. So it really doesn't, the wavelength is not the issue for the antenna. The polarization is the issue for the antenna. So it's just like having, if you have small enough a slit in a double slit experiment, the argument would be that no photon successfully travels through the slit. So all you can get is pieces from the two surfaces, and that's why you have entirely all fringe pattern. You have no light that successfully navigates the slit. All the light is in pieces, and therefore has to be reconstructed into phase again by putting pieces from one side together with pieces from the other surface. So arguments like that already are sort of pointing out the fact. Well, anyway, Shit, where did I leave off? With that in mind, helpful to know the following. When you keep guessing transformer happening over a foot or two initially, I remember, okay, and later about Gary's objection, which I share, I think the wavelength of that first experiment was too long. 1 kilohertz being such a low frequency to be considered radio. Again, it's in the form of photons, and that's the part that matters. The distinction between radio and sound isn't the fact that what the level the frequency's at, it's what medium it's traveling through. And so that sort of proves the whole argument that it's not just like sound. In a sense, my argument would be, is because the fact is it does travel through any medium and empty space. And therefore, having mediums in mediums, having mediums and then saying there's a medium underlying the medium, now you're even getting messier. Where the obviously the statement that the atmosphere is a very thin medium and you can transmit light through it, but we know the light doesn't transmit it through it perfectly. That's why there's 400 times better resolution from space. Hint, hint, do the Eddington experiment from space, because you're not hitting a bunch of crap. Your signal isn't going to be reflected off of a bunch of little atoms in the atmosphere. It's not going to be retarded in some way by those atoms. All right, your headphone speakers might as well be classed as radio transmitters if audio frequencies are to be considered legitimate RF. So again, they're really traveling through, the whole point is the theory is one's traveling through a completely different medium than the other, and certainly my argument is that one is not transmitting through a medium, it is asteroids being thrown into space. And the less crap that's in the space, the more successful the asteroids will be in getting to their target, or getting to the forward position. By rights, less friction. It's that simple. The atmosphere is friction. It's light friction. Okay, it causes light friction. By rights, your antenna should have to be up to about 90 miles long, half the wavelength of 186 miles approximately. So again, the energy is leaving, and if you take the total amount of distance that might be on an arc, right? So the total, if you want to get specific about it, you can say, okay, what do I need to hear the yes and no, like the on and off? We're sending an on, and then we're sending an off. And the fact is the on signal, I guess I'll do the drawing now, is preposterously long, but that's not going to limit us to being able to see the fact that it's on and off. So all we're saying is if it's smallly polarized, if it's a high frequency, okay, then it has a line like this. Okay, like this is how much out of phase the on is. Okay, so here's your on signal, and it has different positions in it that say, okay, this will be a photon when it lands on a surface, and it'll create electricity. So the same kind of thing has happened. So when you go longer and longer wavelengths, you end up with a polarization that can go for a very long time. But if all you need is this on and off, that is all you can, if you can recreate the signal out of just these pieces instead of relying on all of these extra pieces, okay, then you don't have a problem in receiving the signal. But if what you're trying to see is the wavelength of the light, that is, you're trying to see whether it's red or blue, then you're going to be in bigger trouble, because now you're going to have to be able to see a section that has the bits in the right frequency. So it's really, you're sort of getting to carrier versus the modulator. So the modulating signal can be easily detected. It's the carrier that just starts to break down with antennas. But again, if the carrier is your modulation, that is, you've reduced it to just one signal, then you don't need a big antenna, because you don't need to see this pattern and this pattern. You just need to see this pattern. So that's how partially I would explain it. That you can get the idea that it's on off without catching the entire photon. You can just see the bits. And yeah, that wasn't that much. Really wasn't worth the jumping off, because I want to get, I'm going to get to transformers really soon, because that's what he's talking about. Because he's not recognizing a huge difference in what transformers have become in terms of inductors. They're a very different inductor than they were, say, 100 years ago or 200 years ago. They have been modified to do something completely different than what a raw inductor is doing. So if you're going to make a crude transformer, they're not magnetically linked, which was going to be the argument. And so that creates a completely different kind of reception device. All right, sorry I've gone on very long way around explaining the transformer-like action does happen over large distance, provided the fact that the linesman can get electrocuted on dead lines. So the joke here is I made like 3 videos on this exact subject where I pointed out, I played a video where they're receiving radio transmissions, so they have a very long transmission line, electrical transmission line that's not connected. There's a radio transmitter, a half-mile away, and it's creating so much induction in the wire that they can actually play the radio just by shorting the wire to ground. So they short the wire to ground, they can see a big spark, and the spark is actually playing the radio station. So you don't even need a crystal, you don't need nothing, it just plays it in the spark. All right. Completely isolate, switched off when there happens to be a live line running somewhere parallel. So this also did come up in Franklin's conversations on one of the Saturdays, so it's not like this isn't a known phenomenon either. Even if some considerable distance away, possibly out of sight. The longer the dead line, the more voltage will be induced in it by any distance power lines acting as a primary. So the point is the power lines have alternating current, and the alternating current can be induced into anything you put near enough and long enough. So if you create enough of a conductor, you will collect, you can collect a substantial amount of the energy. So it's just like saying that the length of the conductor and its exposure to the energy, the field, the energy, it's just like kind of a solar panel. The more exposure, the more energy you get out of the panel. Okay. The longer the dead line, the more voltage will be induced. Well, it doesn't, the length has to be connected to the source, so it has to have exposure to the source. It's like, if the length is, if the source is here and the length is going this way, obviously there's only so much of the conductor that can be exposed to the source, so some of the extra you can't count as windings. I only know this because I've worked in the electrical distribution industry and had to complete exams of specific topic as well as my own. Alright, so anyway, that's why the first thing linesmen do after isolating blah 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 the earth as conductors. I'm just saying, this is stuff Franklin likely already knows and I know. Okay, Gary might pick a fight along the lines of prove it, show me, etc. No, I've already shown videos of the phenomenon. So again, this raggy little bullshit where you presume to play my role and then make me stupid, and then you can say this and that about who and what I said when I didn't say any of those things, is just so fucking rude. And again, if I harassed other people on the internet, if I chased down Piro and every comment he made on any video, I sat there and injected my critiques, you would say, God, what a petty idiot. Why is he injecting himself into all of those conversations for? Why is he interfering in that other guy's life? I mean, this is just so petty. Well, frankly, I can't. He are either going to have to trust me on this. So again, he's assuming both me and Franklin don't know that transmission lines can collect energy. Yeah, we both know it. and or ring up some linesman to ask whether Steve Bro is making stuff up. Oh, you're just such a weasel. I like to think it's obvious. I don't, because I have no interest in spinning any fibs. Yeah, you do. You're a constant liar. You make shit up. You distort the truth. Look, you made this video where you claimed you proved me wrong, and you didn't even admit that the best experiment you did in the 4 experiments, the one every physicist would pick as the most capable of providing a reliable answer, and you know it. If you asked the physicist ahead of time which experiment's likely to produce the best results, they all would have picked mine. And you know it. They all would have said, yes, springs are really good. Go with that. That's what they would have said to you, retard. I mean, unlike Piro, most physicists know springs are very good at producing a constant amount of force. And very good at measuring it. That's why they had springs and scales, right? That's why scales are made out of springs. It's because they weigh pressure really well. Oh, you're such a weasel. It's easier to be truthful. Oh, what an amazing pile of shit statement that is from this compulsive liar. And so, to the best of my knowledge, I'm always on things of any importance. Yes, you're always lying on any subject, whether it's important or not, as far as I can see. Hope I've not just pissed on your bonfire. So, I mean, just amazing. So he thinks this little trivial piece of information is something, everybody else lacks, and only the great Stephen Bro is aware of this fact. No, you're not the only one aware of it, asshole. Okay, that's not my intention, but I do think you need to be aware that transformer action induction, theoretically at least, happens within the first wavelength or two. No, it happens from the millimeter away to 25 feet away, and it happens at the inverse square law. Okay, and beyond that, at some vague point, there supposedly ceases to be any further callback, i.e., the primary is no longer knows, senses through Lenz's law. So he has his own theory about what Lenz's law is and how it is a factor in this. What kind of load is being passed on to the secondary. So the load part, Stephen Dumbass, I would say. I mean, his, what I would call... obviously missing an important point in his lack of expertise, and you should go ask an expert. Okay. So this is an important distinction. So the only value in this video is the fact that, yes, we have another fact to incorporate into how we define induction. So in the old days, okay, all they did was put a wire. Well, first they just put a wire, straight wire. Doesn't collect much, doesn't do much. Then if you create an inductor that has a coil of wire, it's a little better because, now the coil action is actually producing energy inside the coil. So if I could, if you looked into the coil, the fact is the energy that excites this coil excites itself again. It reflects on the inside. So you're gaining some extra, you're knocking more pins down. You're able to keep the energy in the system. And by keeping it in the system, it isn't radiating out. And so it magnifies. So you get a little bit of magnification. Then they found that, if you take that coil and then you shove a piece of iron in it, now you really magnify this effect, because now the iron will also create a magnetic field, and that magnetic field, now the reflections are even closer, so you're getting more and more action. You're making things hit things more often, more interactions. The more interactions, the more energy, so to speak, right? The more interactions, the more pins. If I get the pins close together, I can knock down lots of pins with the same energy, like dominoes. So, and then it just became an idea of coupling, okay, the inductors. So a transformer, as traditional, what is traditionally a transformer now, the secondary and the primary aren't really inducing, okay, through this field anymore. They're inducing through the magnetic core. So that's when you get a load change. So if you made an inductor this way, if you made a transformer this way, this is your primary, this is your secondary, you can't, the primary has no idea the secondary exists. So if you put 10 volts in here and it's, you got 30 watts, that's all there is. There's 30 watts being transmitted, and it just goes out like a light bulb. And whether or not something's there to receive the light can't make any difference. Okay, because this won't receive enough energy to transmit back to this one. Okay, so the energy that goes into the secondary will not have enough, it won't be bright enough to shine back on this and tell it that somehow it needs to have more energy and it should shoot back more energy. There won't be any feedback. But here, tons of feedback, because what you're really, so you're just using the photons here, and here you're using something more explicit like magnetism. This is more like a magnetic effect. So in a sense, the coil, the magnetism will be pulled into your secondary, and that's why you can produce more wattage in here, because you have a drain. And so it's essentially a way of draining the electricity by draining the magnetic field. So the magnetic field induces up, and it's going on and off, on and off, on and off, and all of that energy is being pulled out, so it can never saturate, because essentially you're producing another, you're energizing another coil with its energy. It's like the solenoid pulling the lead up. It can't pull the lead up in the field, so it's really just pulling the electricity, the magnetism, through the iron core. So yes, the iron core, the primary, cares about what the secondary does. It can see it, it can feel it, but without the core, it can't feel it. A huge difference that Stephen seems unaware of. Whoa, that's not exactly what I wanted to do, but it's close enough. I think this can go up a little. It's just some things don't really work very well. Moves it and shapes it. Does a little more than I asked for. All right, so transformer actions, the secondary. So that's where we were, right? So so there is no, the loads aren't connected in a non-cord transformer. Okay, or to put it more simply, at 1 kilohertz RF, it isn't RF by most normal standards. So of course, RF really just has to do with whether you're using photons or whether you sound where you're vibrating whole atoms. Very different phenomenon. So it's always RF if you're turning the signal into photons. That is, you're moving something called a photon. You're producing a magnetic field, essentially, with a wavelength of 186 miles. So again, the wavelength just has to do with how long the time is between your dots and your dashes. So you turn the light on, you turn the light off, you turn the light on, you turn the light off. That's what you're sending. And the fact is, at the speed of light, it ends up being 186 miles between on and on and on and on. The offs are 186 miles separated, and so are the ons. Anyway, induction can theoretically take place 186 miles away, so it really doesn't matter how far away it is. So that's your theory, Stephen, and you're presuming, you're giving us enlightenment. No, you're one of the people I would be arguing with and saying, where's your evidence for that? Where's your evidence that at 5 miles it still senses the signal? I can receive the signal at 1 millimeter. I don't have to be 186 miles away. And a bit beyond, some kind of gray area no one really knows between near field and far field. So I'd say no evidence that that exists. I guess I can show you a Professor Lewin video where he's taking the antenna and he brings it closer and closer, and the light bulb gets brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. It actually doesn't care what the wavelength is. So they say. It wasn't me who came up with all this, by the way. So you're just paraphrasing Henry Winkler at Harry Rinker at in a sense. You're just doing the same thing as Franklin has to endure from Harry, who just says, "Shut up, Franklin, you don't know what you're talking about." He actually says that to Franklin. Okay, I'm just telling you the theory as I understand it, coupled with the evidence. It's insofar as I was taught. So what's the value of this? You're just saying I'm just imposing on you more draconian notions that the authorities are going to win and you can't fight, and there's no point in fighting because I will regurgitate their shit and spit it at you. I'll chew it and spit it at you because I'm such a great guy. You need to know. No, I don't need to have the standard crap spit at me. And I'm sure Franklin doesn't need that either. He's heard it already. Alright, that linemen get electrocuted occasionally by induction from distant power lines. Well, electrocuted, I think, is a little bit of an exaggeration, but they get a shocky poo. If lines are not earthed when made dead. So again, it really takes a very, very special circumstance for there to be enough voltage, enough amperage, enough wattage to actually harm somebody in some significant way. But like I said, the lines I showed, the ones in the video, it's obviously, if you can get an inch of spark, that's a pretty substantial bit of electricity. This means that if it is induction causing transmission, then perhaps it is a way to check by this whether the primary, the transmitter, draws more power. So the only time you draw more power is if you've tied the two with a core. So he doesn't understand that in this induction on power lines there is no core. So the transmitter didn't know it induced the current. It doesn't matter whether it's grounded. It doesn't matter what you do to the secondary because the primary is in no way, it has no core for it to know what the secondary, the primary can't know what the secondary's, what it is. It doesn't know it even exists. When there is a receiver in the near field suddenly absorbing, see, by induction the energy, the transformer-like action. So again, it's not absorbing, okay, in any kind of sense where there is a string and it's pulling on the string. There's no feedback to the primary from the secondary unless you shove a coil up their butts. You know, unless they both have a common coil, they can't tell what the other one's doing. I honestly don't know what the chances are of you being able to measure some incredibly small rise in power draw at the at the transmitter when the receiver places a load on it through transformer action. So again, that's not what's happening. There is no load being put on it because they aren't linked with a piece of magnetic metal. Okay. If you don't already know, all transformers have this phenomena. So again, he says it's not about transformers, it's about induction. And the point is whether you're inducing directly as a, let's see, if the real point is the distinction between the primary wave, the primary frequency, and the modulated frequency. For what of better phrasing, the moment the secondary draws any power, i.e. the load is applied to the secondary, meaning you start making it do useful work. So this more, I mean, this is all crap that, you know, he's just made the mistake of not separating induction from transformerism. Okay, a transformer's doing something a little different than simple induction, because it is magnetically linked. Anyway, well, the primary draws more current due to Lenz's law. So again, and the only way Lenz's law could really be relevant is the fact that you do have the core. The core is what the eddy currents are being created in, that's creating the extra magnetism. The coils themselves can't do enough Lenz's lawing to have any effect. Like I said, the secondary is going to have such a weak amount of energy produced in it that the secondary can't possibly be sending a signal to the primary, back to the primary, forcing it to create more energy. And if it could, like I said, you'd have this theoretical an oscillator that would go out of control. Same as drawing power from a generator, it gets harder to turn because of Lenz's law. So again, your whole theory is wrong. This isn't about a generator. This isn't about a transformer. This isn't about a motor wrapped around iron cores again. So all wrong. I've probably exceeded the character limit. Yes, better go, but he won't. But I can't help thinking you could avoid all this by simply transmitting at, say, 1 gigahertz wavelength, about a foot. So again, how would that? He thinks that you could transmit a 1 gigahertz wave a foot, and that somehow you're getting rid of induction. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Then you are in the far field, so that's even bizarre. Receiving, so again, he really thinks it matters to the receiver. The receiver and the transmitter have to be certain distance from each other, or they can't see the wave. See, he's still thinking in terms of a wave, and somehow you have to be far enough away or the wave can't be seen. The secondary is not seeing a wave, it's seeing an on-off. It's seeing even if you believe it's a wave and it's gradual, it's seeing 99, 98, 97, 96, 95, 94. It's seeing that. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be a wavelength away to see it. God, what an idiot. Anyway, receiving a yard or two away, and it can't be blamed on transformer-like action. So again, it was never precise to say it's transformer action, because it's really just an inductor where you don't have any core linked coil, so it's not really a transformer. But the argument is that what you're doing is essentially the same as a transformer, in that the antenna is always a secondary to the primary. That's exactly how it works. Okay, although you do then have the problem of seeing the waveform, I guess. Yes, this is the whole problem, is to prove that light is a wave, or you have to in some way show it to be, that you have to prove that the components can't be digital, and that's the tricky part. The RF equipment is extremely expensive, so he's probably telling Franklin something he already knows. Franklin already bought stuff, so he hasn't even watched any of Franklin's previous videos, so he really doesn't know what Franklin does know, and he's just assuming he's too stupid. Yikes, just under $1 million for 20 gigahertz. About $30,000 for an oscilloscope. Gary says that's what he would have used instead of an IP wave counter meter. Well, clearly oscilloscopes can measure gigahertz frequencies and detect them. Yes, so yes, that's what I would have used. The so-called radar experiment, but I don't think he must have realized how much RF oscilloscopes cost. Well, like I said, you don't need them to be generating the signal, you just need them to be able to detect the signal. He probably saw the cheap one MIT were using in the radar experiment, but that wasn't reading the RF. And again, I don't know if you really have to be able to detect, and that's all you want to do, the radar, or twice the frequency of the radar, which is the tricky one. But I'm sure they can tune one of those radar dishes to actually detect the higher frequency, double the frequency. So you just need one that can detect double the frequency, and then you really can do the experiment that's really a proof. If you can detect the double frequency, a peak in the double frequency, then you really have proven that the frequencies are just overlapping. And that's why you're not detecting them, is because they've created a new higher frequency. Okay, it was only a 400 hertz cheap as chips model, so it was just reading the audio. So that's silly in my opinion, but fine, whatever. Oh well, we are all learning here. I don't mind admitting I am a complete amateur at this radio lark, but I can often see yourself and Gary scrambling around trying to piece together info that is by rights a real expert in radio could put us all straight on in just a few minutes. Well, as you just pointed out, some of this stuff really isn't radio, in the sense that you're getting into the microwave range and you're getting into radar ranges. That's the science gets a little more complicated because you can't use the same equipment, as you just pointed out. You can't afford the $1 million transmitter and receiver, so it does get a little tricky. I'm just trying to throw you a few bits I've learned, but sincerely hoping you just go and ask someone who knows far better than I do. So again, more of this advice. Go to conventional physics. They'll tell you the truth. They really thought about it, and they really have great answers like bent space that tell you everything you need to know. How you can go about your test. Sorry to write such length. Can't help it. Yeah, that's right. Oh God. So Franklin responds with exactly, like I could have said Franklin's part here. If we consulted a radio expert, we would find that they themselves don't have a good idea why radio works either. In my email discussion group, we have a radio expert, Harry Rinker. And while we can do useful engineering, the theory behind radio doesn't make sense even to a seasoned veteran. This is just like how we know how to engineer things with gravity, but have no clue as to how it actually works. Except I do. So asking the question why radio works and what our radio waves are, if they are waves at all, is still a valid open question in science. So he's basically just saying, well, he could have said it a little firmer and just pointed out how Harry insults me every single opportunity he gets. Okay, and says, you know, read your Bible, and that's all he says to me. Just keeps saying, read your Bible. So I don't think Harry has a clue. All right, anyway, as a physicist, I also try to make mechanical explanations which have a direct analogy to phenomena that we already understand. That is why I have such a strong bent towards explaining radio waves as sound waves, though through the material of space. And obviously space must be a material for that to happen. For it to be like sound waves, it has to, in a like manner, move particles. Sound is moving atoms. You need to move some elementary particle for there to be the same kind of effect. Where I would argue you don't need the dominoes, right? If you have a domino you can launch into the air, you don't need dominoes to hit dominoes to hit dominoes. You just make your domino go from point A to point B. You don't bother with all of the supplementary interactions. On the question of particles and waves, I would remind you that the waves involve particles and that ultimately all interactions, including radio waves, depend on particles and their collisions. So ultimately, in my theory, could also be called a particle theory. Gary has his name for his imaginary particles. So again, I don't know why this name thing is such an issue for you. Okay, and they're not necessarily imaginary. They're being asserted as just as real as your bullshit particles. Okay, so I mean, I could characterize your particles as bullshit particles, the bullshit positronies, you know. So I mean, you know, play a little fair, Franklin, that carry out all the forces. Yes, at a frequency they're photons, not at a frequency, you know, gravity. And if you polarize them, that is make some red and some blue, then you can make magnetism. That particles does exist, but it is a wave packet, so whatever that is, which is just a short wave pulse, which still doesn't make any sense to me. A particle wave, as small as a single cycle when travels through space as a finite non-dispersing pulse in a straight line. Well, how do you make a straight line out of your particle field? That would be the other question. Where's the geometry for straight lines? You lose the geometry when you have a matrix of particles. There's no such thing as straight lines anymore. You have the checkerboard problem. The diagonals are the wrong length line. It has most of the characteristics of a particle, except that they collide, they superimpose and go right through each other, or interfere or cancel or reinforce each other. They do not reflect off each other as true particles do, so this is how I resolve the wave-particle duality, explain both the wave-like and particle-like photons. Well, you really don't, because the real challenge is the two-slit experiment, and frankly, that's not going to explain it. Anyway, so Stephen, again, just a pile of shit. Well, seeing as you two derive the same immense enjoyment watching Gary flounder, so what the fuck? That's a real projection. Now, that's not what Franklin said, okay? So that's just being, that's just finding excuses to create problems between people. You're just, this kind of interference and this kind of crap is just really offensive, that you would interfere in relationships that other people have this way. But that's what you do. Okay, I would rather be wrong. It doesn't hurt me to be wrong. Well, clearly you can't deal with it at all, because everything you do is pretty much wrong. I mean, again, are you going to sit there and say your video proved something? I mean, you really think you're not wrong to say you proved it, when the best experiment proved me right and you wrong? That was the facts, and you perverted them insanely. You fooled everybody who commented. Everybody who watched the video had the impression that you actually did prove that the springs don't compress the same, when that was exactly what the experiment proved. They compress the same. I mean, you're so dishonest. Ugh, what a despicable character. Like when recently a mindless marbles comment conflicted with part of my hypothesis. I didn't do a Gary and plan on killing myself. So there's no, this is all just more, I made a video where I thought I was wrong, okay? Just like Feynman did this. This happened to Feynman numerous times. Where he thought he had an answer to a long-held problem, and then he'd go talk to one of his friends and find out it was horseshit. Now, I don't have any of those kind of networking. I can't network with somebody and say, hey, what about this idea? So I made a mistake, and it just seemed like the world was too stupid if they were really defending this idea. And that's all. So, but yes, you just want to keep harping on that, because that's all you have is evidence of anything. And just proves just how petty you are. But anyway, fine, whatever. I mean, it's all part of reality. We all have to accept our mistakes and the fact that some people are going to nag us with them for the rest of our lives. So what? It's not a very good argument, because I've conceded I made a mistake, asshole. So you're really not making much of an argument, except to say, oh, Gary is capable of making mistakes. Yes, Gary's capable of making mistakes. That doesn't mean all of his arguments are wrong, jackass. And it certainly doesn't defend you making a live video claiming you proved an alternative theory when you didn't even come close to any reasonable standard of proof, where your results were clearly in direct conflict. Alright, anyway, let's see. I just accepted that Mindless Marbles was saying really did make absolute sense, and I must therefore be wrong. I wonder what this was about. Oh, I have to go look and find it. It probably doesn't bother me that much because I trust MM a heck of a lot more, and I have good reason to. So I mean, the guy calls himself Mindless Marble, so you can sort of get the idea that maybe this isn't the most reliable source in the universe. It's always been just a bit of fun to me. See, that's the other part here. So, this asshole is in this for some other reason. And clearly the only reason he's in it is to be a troll. Because he's not really adding any value. He just pretended to be an expert and he was wrong. And, just typically making noise. And what is he doing in this conversation but just interfering in my conversation with Franklin? Trying to unravel mysteries. It's not like a religion to me. Yeah, it is. Whereas I do get the impression Gary's life revolves around his virtual supposed infallibility. Well, there is no infallibility, but there is the argument that I have now 3 videos I've put up and nobody has taken a single shot at them. Okay, so I have what is a photon? What's the counter argument? Where's their mistake in the video? Where is something implausible? What is gravity? Where is something implausible? Where did I make a mistake? Where is it outside the bounds of reasonable? And what is energy? Well, on that subject, you're going to be part of my evidence now, because I can just show the end of your video and just show how, see, there's the evidence. Amazing. I'll have to think on it and see if I can guess which experiment you are referring to. Thanks for the hint. Oh, yeah. I mean, that doesn't make any sense either. I generally didn't realize for the first 3 years of knowing Gary, so he's just obsessed, that somehow this subject is about Gary, when no, it's about what's the shape of the energy traveling through space. Knowing Gary, that he held so many sick views, so now he's going to get into some sort of my sickness. Yes, I care for animals. I don't eat them, and I care for them. That makes me sick. I'm sick because I don't share Stephen's love of brutalizing little furry creatures and eating them. Okay. Talking about how much he would love to kill large numbers of people for the pleasure of it, etc., etc. Yes, I will argue there are lots of assholes on planet Earth, and the entire planet would function so much better and be so much more pretty and beautiful, and everything would be so much better on this planet if those people were just annihilated. So yes, I think you can realistically make half the human population disappear tomorrow, and it would do nothing but enhance every aspect of the remaining people's lives. Every bit of their life would be better. Yeah, I believe that's theoretically possible. So I had no conflict except with his science. So again, this is just until I started hearing all those dozens and dozens of clips of what? Asshole. Expressing real intent and desire to end as much life as possible and enjoy it. So again, this is, this has nothing to do with the physics. So it's just more injection, more attempt. I mean, maybe, Franklin has some religious views. I haven't, harped him to find out these answers, because what's the point of it? It doesn't really have anything to do with the physics. Yes, it would disappoint me if he was a silly person, but, too bad. I told a friend today about the large number of, daren't say case I have the numbers wrong, dead cats. So again, this is just what's so disgusting about these people's behavior. They really think I have an obligation to go across the internet and explain the context of every conversation I've ever had. Clearly, I don't want any cat to die. But I do understand that if female feral cats keep having babies in the wild here, in the city, that every one of their kittens will die horribly. I've seen it with my eyes. I'm the witness to it with my eyes. And you're telling me I'm a bad person because I don't think your silly answer of imposing surgery on the animals and then throwing them back on the street to eat garbage is much of a solution, retard. I just can't believe how petty these people are, that they all keep going to subjects and totally mischaracterize my ambitions. Totally mischaracterize them. As if I'm doing anything but attempting to prevent the number of victims. And there's, again, in the context of they have no solution. they're pretty much saying don't spend any money trying to cure malaria because the only thing that matters are the current sufferers. So don't spend any money on it. Don't spend any money on Mars missions or any other mission because there's people right here, right now that need the money. So he would do nothing, okay, but put band-aids on wounds. He'd never cure a disease. He wouldn't make an antivirus for coronavirus. He would just keep cleaning up the snot, and the dead bodies. That's his strategy. That's the thing he would do because he hasn't the balls to do anything that requires work and enduring the fact that there is no free lunch. You have to pay for solutions. Solutions are expensive, and he'll pay nothing for them. Because if I can criticize one tiny thing, if he puts a run in a woman's stocking, he thinks it's legitimate for me to say, "Oh, your idea doesn't work. You look at the harm you caused that poor woman by putting a run in her stocking." I mean, what a despicable hunk of shit. I mean, these people are so lame. Oh, it's just such a disgusting thing to do, to misparaphrase somebody's argument, completely mischaracterize it, pigeonhole it in this disgusting manner, and claim that you're doing honor. Oh yeah, I'll go fucking do that in somebody else's conversation with somebody. Again, if I made up lies like you make up about Piro and then harangued him and chased him across the internet, spouting lies to everybody he interacts with, you'd know what an asshole I was, you fucking idiot. You fucking duplicitous creep. And again, this is a guy who has no respect for the common courtesy on the internet where you don't use anybody's real name if they're not broadcasting using that name. You respect that fact. Now, the fact that Steven's too stupid to understand that it's not a great idea in the modern age to do anything to indicate where you might live and all that kind of stuff, because he's too dumb to realize that is a security risk. That someday, if you had a few thousand subscribers, you might realize that some of the people subscribed to you are absolutely insane. But he doesn't care about that either. Oh, what a disgustingly stupid creature. Because I guess I simply got used to the idea of a vague recollection of Gary's excuses about having about it being for their own good. Well, there are things for their own good. Lots of times zoo animals are put to sleep, because they're just a little bit too disabled, they're too broken. And it's because everybody says, yeah, what's the point? Why are you doing surgery on these animals? They don't want the surgery. They didn't sign a consent form. Why are you deciding for them what's a life worth living? It's a burden, these decisions, and you're just saying, no, there's nothing, no, always do the surgery. Always force the animal to endure the suffering. Force it to live. You're like some pro-life lunatic. I can't honestly remember the details now, so yeah, just wonderful. You can't remember details, but you're going to make some sort of veiled assertion that I have some sort of bad character. I mean, just fuck you, okay? You can't get what you deserve too soon. But you remind me of just how crazy this is, and started Googling where he used to live. So here we go. I mean, what is this? Why is this any of your business? Wanted to dig deeper. She had no interest other than, why does he say so many lunatikish things? Oh, I'm so interested in your relationship with some crazy also fanatic who can't get their own life, that they can only live by, doing this shadow thing of some other person's life. And concerned for the feeble-minded people who could be influenced by his careless talk. Oh, so you don't influence feeble-minded people. There aren't any in your retarded audience. Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, God, this is so disgusting. Today, among other related tasks, I was gathering some entertaining footage of Gary's batshit crazy supporters. Who knows what that even means? Which will look nice if you can use them to frame Gary's visually, as I remember who really is crazy enough to support him. So again, this is, he's going to quote mine, years of videos people might have made and do. So again, what does this have to do with anything honorable or decent in an argument? Oh, that's right, it has nothing to do with it. This is the resort of the people who don't have an argument. They can't make a counter argument, so they have to make these distorted propaganda. That's what they have to rely on. So that's who this asshole is. He's just a fascist propagandizing asshole who can't make an argument unless he cheats the argument. Just like he cheated those experiments. He's just a fucking cheater. Okay, without these people, he wouldn't have any support, and the sheer unlikelihood that any of the particular individuals know how to put the batteries in their TV remote. So again, he's just saying all this crap. He has no evidence that my audience is less intelligent than anybody else's audience, and I'd certainly argue that no, if you did an IQ test, frankly, they're going to come out pretty fucking good. So why don't we see? Why don't we test your audience, right? The 45 lunatics that are subscribed to your batshit bullshit, you know, who find you an entertaining or interesting character. Let's go see how many brain cells those fucking morons have. Anyway, thanks for the succinct explanation. So he just keeps all of this from a paragraph that Franklin wrote. I did really enjoy I did reply properly, but hit a wrong button in my tired state, and the message got corrupted and ruined beyond repair. No idea what I pressed. Clumsy me. Oh, so you're the asshole who can't put batteries in your fucking remote. You can't even figure out how to post a comment on YouTube, you dumbass. Why don't I take that quote of yours and I'll just play that in a video over and over again. I can't figure out how to post a comment. It goes all whackety-backety. I mean, yeah, I'll quote mine the fuck out of you, fuckface. And then all of your friends. So any video you post of any, you know, person singing or something, I'll make a mockery out of it. Alright? And I'll send them emails about what a fucking little Weasley douchebag you are. I mean, fuck you. Alright, so enough. So now we know more about Stephen Bro and what kind of asshole he is. Okay, not only does he make lying, shitting, crappiest physics videos on Earth, not only does he hate the scientific method and doing anything honest, you know, he does this on the internet. He injects himself like this. Like the other trolls, he tries to disrupt people's interactions with other people. He thinks he knows what's good for them. He knows better. You know, and it's all premised on his delusionary lies. It's all premised on the fact that the man obviously has no dick. Hasn't had one for a long time. Alright. Enough of a video. Shit. What a monstrosity. Anyway, so till the next time and such. Back to the physics, I promise. No more of this indulge the trolls bullshit rhetoric. But it's just so, you know, what are you going to do, right? I mean, I'm just saying, it's just right there. He's just got to inject himself and make a mess. Did the same thing for me and Hostler Day. Just got in the way. Alright, till the next time.